Welcome to the Breakfast Leadership Show, a top 2% global podcast and one of California's top leadership shows. Each episode brings you real-world insights on burnout prevention, workplace culture, and leadership excellence. And now, here's your host, Michael D. Levitt.
Welcome back. I've got Trevor McGregor on the line. Trevor, how are you?
I am blessed and grateful, Michael. Thank you for having me on the show.
Really looking forward to this conversation. It's been on my calendar for a bit, and I'm like, come on, New Year, let's flip this over so I can talk with Trevor. So why don't you share a little bit about you, and then we'll jump into the conversation.
Well, thank you very much. And again, my name is Coach Trevor McGregor. I'm a high-performance, peak performance master platinum coach. And my goodness, my background was spending a long time in corporate. I built a $50 million hospitality company up in Canada. So you might hear a little bit of a Canadian accent. And we were a very large company, a private company that went really well until they didn't, because I had invested a whole bunch of money with that company in my early 30s. And I thought I was going to be rich. I thought I was going to, take my business acumen to another level. And it didn't work out. And I remember the day that my boss called me and he said, my partner called me and he said, Trevor, we're expanding too fast. We've got a lot of, challenges going on. It was right around 2001, and we can all remember what happened back then. And then eventually I lost all that money, Michael. I lost everything, and it was a low point in my life. And so what does anyone do when they're down and out? Well, they seek out a business coach, and that's what I did. And I found a coach, and that coach literally changed my life, as he said, you know what, you got to get up, you got to dust yourself off, and you got to find a way to keep on keeping on, which I think is what a lot of, your listeners probably experience when they hit a speed bump or a roadblock or have a failure. And that's when coaching transitioned and changed my life. As I got back up, I dusted myself off, and I started to do things differently by changing my mindset. And once you start to change your mindset, you start to show up a little bit differently. And I went on to do other things in corporate, built a real estate empire, absolutely loved helping people, and went to work for Tony Robbins. And it was amazing going to work with Tony, as I got to peek behind the curtain and see really what allows this man to go out there and change lives. I spent half a decade as one of his top coaches, and then I left to open Trevor McGregor International, and now I help business owners that are trying to absolutely scale their business, make more money, get back their time. And it's not for the faint of heart, as you know, but it's something I'm pretty passionate about. And to date, I've done now over 45,000 coaching sessions. And that's an actual statistic. You might hear my voice is a little raspy, but working with entrepreneurs, business owners, Fortune 500 executives, a lot of doctors that want to create a side hustle, or attorneys. And really, at the end of the day, I believe that success is 80% psychology and 20% mechanics, or what you do. So that's a little bit about my background.
Yeah, a couple things come to mind, actually a bunch, but let me see if I can remember them. First one is, and I think it might have been Jim Rohn that said this, or Brian Tracy, I'm sure, said it, and I'm sure Tony has as well, and everybody else is, when you are successful and you build something and it's successful in your eyes, or even in the eyes of peers, this is successful, and then it all goes away. A lot of times, and rightfully so, it is, devastating for sure. But where the mindset comes in is, I did it before, I can do it again. I think it was Munger that said, the first 100,000 is the hardest to make because you've never done it. And then after that, you're like, okay, I can make 100K. That's not a problem. That I can move on with that. The second thing came out, and I'll jump over one, because I want to dig into behind the curtain with Tony for a second, as much as you can reveal, of course. But you mentioned that you worked with doctors, and I worked in healthcare, primary care, primarily for about 15 years, and gifted clinicians just can tell you, there's like 8 billion types of medicines out there, and they can tell you, okay, this many milligrams will do this and this and all that. How they keep on top of that, I don't know. But I also know, in my experience, many of them don't know a thing about business. They get in trouble, they run into problems, they don't monetize things. So to hear that they wanted to work with you makes me very, very happy, because I want the physicians to be taken care of, because they're taking care of us. I want them to be taken care of as well from a financial standpoint to make it worth it. I remember I gave a talk at a Becker's Healthcare Conference a few years ago. And, the doctors were saying, I'm working more hours and I'm making less money. And I'm like, that doesn't align. What's going on? And a lot of it was all the compliance rules, the Affordable Health Care Act, the documentation, fighting with insurance companies. And they're getting it from every angle. And, when I was in healthcare as an executive and administrator, I always told the doctors, like, I want you to play doctor. I want you to be dealing with the admin stuff. Let me do that. And I think when physicians work with coaches like you, then that's something of many things you can advise them. Okay, you're going to spend some money here on this, but this is what you're going to gain from that. And it's beautiful that you work with. I mean, you've worked with 45,000, conversations and growing. You've worked with everybody, so you've seen it and done it. So, obviously I want to let you to respond to that, and then we'll pick on Tony for a second, and then we'll continue. Go ahead.
Absolutely, Michael. It's really, doctors or attorneys or people, they grow up wanting something, and they usually go to school for a long time. And for the doctors that I work with or anyone, they study, the primary thing, which is what they're going to do, which is medicine. They don't get the business training. So that's why when they want to start a side hustle, they want a second income, they want to invest in real estate, maybe they want to dabble in, the stock market or crypto, they don't have the certainty, the clarity, or the confidence to move forward. And so they sabotage themselves or they second guess themselves. And it's the same thing if you're doing a startup or you're an entrepreneur or a solopreneur or a small business owner, a franchise owner. Like you said, I've worked with everyone at this stage of the game. And I mean, I'd have to be an idiot at this stage not to see what allows people to, remain stuck versus have explosive success moving forward. Because at the end of the day, there's only what we call the 5 key reasons why people fail to scale. And I think as you hear them and the listener hears them, the goal would be to listen to these 5 things and ask yourself, which one or which ones of these are really holding me back from having that explosive growth. Does that make sense?
Well, most definitely. And we definitely want to dive into those 5 because I'm guessing some people may have all 5 of them. So we'll jump back to your time with Tony Robbins. And Tony is one of those individuals that, and we all know him, he's probably one of the most famous people out there. He can work with pretty much anybody he wants to. So when he's working with you and you get, that really limited access to, that world and, all the amazing things that he has done and continues to do, what was those early days like? I mean, did you pinch yourself or did you go into it? How, I'm just curious, or knowing you, it's like, no, you know your stuff. You're like, no, I'm confident. I belong here. But, every one of us, has that little bird inside of our head. Occasionally it'll go, why are you here? And you go, shut up, bird. I know why I'm here. I got the gifts. I got the skills. But what was that like? I mean, because again, that is from my vantage point anyway, a very intense but impactful type of entity that all is, the Tony Robbins experience and everything he does. So, you said you spent a good chunk of time working with him and, for him and all of that. What was that like? Because I know a lot of people would be interested. It's like, what would it be like to work with Tony? And I'm guessing it's like, what you see is what you get. So I'm guessing it's not going to be dramatically different than, what we see when he's, talking with people and all of that.
Well, it's a great question. And again, my journey with Tony isn't for the faint of heart because to become a Robbins coach, and again, first off, love Tony. Tony's been doing his work on this beautiful planet, Michael, for over 40 years now. And when you really think about it, he's got very high standards, right? So even as you apply to become a Tony Robbins coach, I mean, I remember back to the day where, I put in an application and there were 500 applications for just 20 spots, 500 applications for 20 spots. And I got shortlisted down from 500 to 250, 250 to 100, 100 down to 50. And still then, you don't become a coach. You got to go to all the events. You got to listen to all the CDs, and this goes back. And yeah, they weren't MP3s. They were CDs back in the day. You got to read all the books, all at your own expense and travel around North America. And once you do that, you then have the opportunity to go do a practicum with Tony and his senior team. And I flew to Orlando, Florida. And I remember, that 10 days, it was one of the toughest things I've ever done because they put you through the paces. They don't want anybody, just anyone being a Robbins coach. And so I remember calling my wife on about the 3rd day. And I said, geez, I don't think I'm going to make it. I don't think I've got what it takes to become, a Robbins coach at the elite level. And I remember my wife saying, honey, you've practiced this, you've listened to everything, you've gone to the events, you've played full out, just stay with it, and if you make it through, great. And if you don't, well, at least you tried. And so I really buckled down and I went through it. And then, next thing you know, the 10 days went by. And not only did I, get offered a position with Tony, but I got offered an elite coaching position with Tony due to my business background, my franchise background, my real estate background, and everything that I had done in my life up to that point. And that's when you go to work for the man, the myth, the legend. He pulls back the curtain and you literally see what makes this man work. All of the frameworks, all of the distinctions, all the psychology, all of the things that business owners are missing. Tony Robbins is, absolutely one of the best. And as he transitions that to the team of coaches, we now get that skill set, that mindset, but even more than that, Michael, the heart set to go out there and help the people that are really here to, make us live a better life. And so again, the small businesses, the medium-sized businesses, even the Fortune 500 executives I've worked with, the startups, the franchises, the doctors, the attorneys, I mean, every single one of them has some sort of limiting belief or roadblock that is preventing them from really going from where they are to where they want to be. But using a lot of Tony's frameworks and then me creating my own frameworks as I did call after call after call, it's become amazing because you start to spot patterns. You start to see what business owners are doing or not doing. And so my stuff combined with Tony's stuff is really what's allowed me to have tremendous success in getting my clients to move forward.
Yeah, it's leverage from your mentors, and then you can be a mentor and you just grab from the tool bag from wherever. Like, things that I do in my career and, the experiences that I have, people ask me, where'd you learn how to do that? I'm like, let me think about that for a minute. It could have been this, or it might've been from this experience. I kept the tools that I thought would be beneficial. So let's segue back to that list of 5, because again, you and I both, we love small business. It's the heart and soul of our country. Small businesses, some of them grow to be really big companies, but they started small and, doing whatever and to help be successful, whatever their definition of success is, of course, is important. So in all this work you've done and all the mentorship and working with all of these people over the years, you kind of land on there's 5 things that tend to, kind of hold people back. So what are they?
Yeah, well, again, it doesn't matter if you're new to business, maybe you're an intermediate, or maybe you've been in business a long time. I guarantee as you hear these 5 things, you're probably going to be able to say, all right, on a scale of 1 to 10, where am I at with each one of these? It's almost like, what I call, Michael, taking a personal inventory, because if even one of these things lands with you, when would now be a good time to address it? And I'll talk about how to do that in just a minute. So this is what I call the 5 key reasons why business owners fail to scale. And we kick it off with number 1, which is limiting beliefs, right? Limiting beliefs. We've all got them, right? That it's going to take a long time, or it's too hard, or I'm going to have to invest a lot of money, or what if I try to expand and the market shifts? And, those are quality questions to ask. But if those same questions and your limiting beliefs or the saboteurs upstairs in your head are holding you back, you're never, ever, ever going to get out of the starting gate. So again, we've got to come in and start addressing those limiting beliefs. Does that first one resonate with you?
Oh, yeah. I've been guilty of that, and it doesn't matter from when we had the pandemic or when I first launched my business, or is anybody going to listen to my show, or is anybody going to read this article, or is there going to be anybody at, when I'm doing a keynote talk, is anybody going to be in there? Are they going to all fall asleep? Are they all going to be playing on their iBinkies? What's going to happen? That's my brother's nickname for my iPhone, because I'm on it like a pacifier. It's like, the screen time proves it, but yeah, no, it happens to all of us. And even when, it's like you had, the best year ever. And they're like, well, I just like, why are you? And I know why, because our brains tend to do those things, but it's like, you gotta celebrate your victories and write them down. And so that way, when you're having those moments, go back to that list. Like, what have I done in the last 6 months? Or what have I done in the last 2 quarters that have moved things forward? And they could be big things, they could be small things, but you know what? you don't have a garden until you plant a seed, and if you plant those seeds of good things, the good things are going to come.
That's it. And I love that analogy, Michael, because as you plant those good things, and you could go as far back as you want. I mean, maybe you did it in business. Maybe you hitchhiked around Europe when you were a teenager or after high school. Maybe you got your driver's license, or maybe you won the grade 4 spelling bee. You've got to flood the brain with the chemicals, that really get you fired up and excited about achieving again. So number one is those limiting beliefs, whereas number two is a lack of a strategic plan. Right? More business owners spend time planning their 1-week trip to Mexico a year than their business or their life. And we've got to get a real close look at, well, where are you at? Where do you want to go? And what's preventing you from moving in that direction? And we're not just talking about where do you want to go in the short term. We're also talking about where do you want to be in the midterm? That might be 3 years out, or where do you want to be in the long term? Long term for me could be 5 to 10 years. And once we know all of that, we can start reverse engineering a plan to help take you there. So how does that one land with you?
Oh, it's something that I do all the time, and it's a living, breathing document. It's not just, okay, here's that. So I'll look at it. It's time this recording, we're in a brand new year. And usually at the end of the year, I do a deeper dive and go, okay, let's look at what I thought a year ago. Let's look at that.
Yep.
Okay. How do those things play out? Okay. Any shifts, any twists, turns? Okay. I didn't hit that. Why? And I know why, because I made a decision to, not do that and do this instead because of opportunities and interest, or you name it, whatever it may be. But it's like goals. You write them down. They're living, breathing things. You have to keep moving towards them a step at a time. It's like, the 1%, you improve 1% a day. In a year, you've 3x yourself, almost 4x yourself.
That's right.
Hopefully that's not eating. That would not be healthy for you, but or losing that much weight might not be good for you either. But work with a healthcare professional on those things anyway. But it's just the business you work at, whether you own it or you're working for somebody, take ownership on that. There's an element of you that allows the things that you get to do happen, and you have the skills to do it. So don't go through it passively. I see too many people, and I understand with people burned out and they're stressed and they're worried about A through Z, or in your case, A through Z. I'm a dual citizen. I get it. So,
Thank you.
yeah, you're welcome. So I get it. But it's important to, and sometimes you have to pause. You have to take a step back and go, okay, where am I at? What's going on? What do I see based on the information that I have? Do I anticipate any potential issues? Let's go ahead and see if we can mitigate those now. Is there anything we can do now that prevents something that happen, maybe in Q3 or Q4, or something just completely happens out of the blue, where, you had a market and all of a sudden that market, it no longer exists, or, business drops off dramatically because of whatever reasons. Okay. What can you do about that right now to alleviate as much as you can? And you can say,
That's right.
You can sit there and play victim if you want. That's not going to pay your bills. Boy, if they could monetize victimhood, man, there'd be trillionaires everywhere.
That's it. Very, very good.
Quite frankly, I hope they never do monetize victimhood. It's not a place I like to go. It's away at me. But no, that's spot on. The second one is definitely spot on. I know a lot of people struggle with that.
You bet. And that's a perfect tee up to number 3, because number 3 is a lack of systems for support. A lack of systems for support, because we can get rid of your limiting beliefs, or at least work on those. We can get a plan or a roadmap or a recipe to take you from where you are to where you want to go. But Michael, if you're not creating systems that support that, if you're not hiring the right people, if you're not using AI today, if you're not, really, split testing the things, you're missing out on going further faster. You're missing out on what we call, being able to optimize signal and get rid of the noise, because systems are what allows you to continue to, compound and make things better without you having to grind. And I find today that business owners are, really grinding. They're drowning in tactics, right? They're time starved. They're disconnected. They're trapped by their business. They're unfulfilled, and they don't even know what they're optimizing for anymore. Well, not on my watch, because we come in, we get rid of those limiting beliefs. We create the plan, we create systems and people and processes to support the plan. And that's before we even get to number 4 and 5. What do you think?
Systems and scale both start with the letter S. You have to have systems. You have to go into it with the mindset of, okay, how do I remove myself from this business? And what does that mean? Like, I want it just to be an advisor where I'm not really doing anything hands-on. Do I want a hybrid of it where I still get my hands dirty, or ebb and flow? How does that look? What does that look like for me or for many entrepreneurs? And you run into them all the time. I do too. Is these people? There's somebody that organization I'm helping out right now. They are spending way too much time in their business and not on it. And they're like, you're focusing so much on these things. Do those things show up in your bank account immediately? I'm not saying you don't need to do them. You do, but you have to have systems around that. It's like, okay, there's many ways to automate things. There's many ways to use virtual assistants or hire people local, whatever makes sense. But you have to understand, okay, what do you want your business to look like? Short term, medium, long term. How do you want that to be? And I said the reverse engineering you mentioned a moment ago is, Steve Jobs said work backwards. All the legends and the smart people and advisors understand that is part of the system. Is you have to figure out where do you want to be, where are you now, connect the dots, and figure out if you don't know how to connect those dots. That's when it's really important for you to get some mentorship, because they can help you and let you see things that you're obviously not seeing, because if you did, you would have done it already. And
that's it.
It's so important. But yeah, I'm a huge advocate for systems. I'm always looking at ways like, okay, how can I automate this better? Whether it's, generic, okay, scan my emails and, come up with some draft response. Don't send them, because I don't want those that can get ugly, but frame them or code them so that way it narrows the amount of time that I'm looking at email going, okay, what's this? And a lot of time is the same type of messaging, but it's like, okay, let's classify them. And even to the point where I've set up for like newsletters and things like that, I have a separate account that I use. Newsletters go there. That way when I allocate time to look at things, I will do that. And of course, now with AI, I can have it give me a nice little summary of all of them. And then I can see, it's amazing how much time it allows me to be me instead of just nose into the email all day and all night, which, I've done way too many years of that and don't want to do that ever again.
Well, you're teeing up the ball perfectly for number 4, because number 4, Michael, is poor time management. Poor time management. So if we've got number 1, limiting beliefs, number 2, a lack of a strategic plan, number 3, a lack of systems for support, the 4th thing on the list is really doing what I call a time audit. And if you go look at most business owners that I've coached, like you said, they're working in the business instead of on the business, but it's even worse than that, right? Because really what they're doing is they're not even figuring out what their zone of genius is. Right? What should they be working on, and what should they be delegating or dumping off to someone else? And we all have our zone of genius. We shorten that term to call it the ZOG. And once a business owner or somebody, really identifies what their, best skill set is, and they optimize that and surround themselves with other people that have the, zone of genius for that task, I'm telling you, I've seen companies absolutely explode to the good side when everyone's doing the right things in the right order at the right time and for the right reasons. Because most times, again, people are either working on something that is urgent or important. They default to making everything urgent instead of, stopping and carving out time and protecting time to work on what is truly important. And I'm telling you, once we do number 1, 2, 3, and 4, it gets us ready for number 5. But before we go to number 5, I'll have you weigh in on poor time management.
Yeah, I color code my calendar, and I always tell people, if you're colorblind, that's cruel. Use your favorite symbol. I used to, real quick story, I worked with a guy, it was an internet market research firm, publicly traded company, rhymes with ComScore. Okay, so I was in the early days of the organization, and I was part of the support team, and we were deploying servers and data centers all across the world. And we had one of the guys in our IT department, And every once in a while, we would make our own network cables if we needed to. So if there was a bad network cable, we were at a data site, it's hard to go find a network cable. It's easier now, but it wasn't like Amazon delivery back then. So it was like, okay, we need to make a cable. So we'd all have crimpers and things like that and make our network cables. And this individual, we didn't know at the time, because he didn't tell us, was colorblind. Now, if you've ever looked at a network cable, there's different colors, as in the cable, and they have to be, match on both ends. And he'd make some cables, and they didn't work. Surprise, because he couldn't see the colors. And we're like, what's with these cables? And finally, he was embarrassed by that, and all of us as a collective went to him. It's like, dude, no, don't be embarrassed. I'm glad you told us. We won't have you do that again. Okay. There's other things you can do, but we're so sorry. So what we did is anytime he would go on a deployment, we made sure to load him up with some pre-made cables of different sizes and things like that. So he didn't have to, I felt horrible. So here's this guy trying to figure out what these colors are and he can't see them. And it's like, so going back to the color coding or coding your calendar, I've done that for years and for a couple reasons. One, for me, then that way, I can look at my calendar and I can squint. I don't even have to look at the text. I can squint and I go, okay, I got a bunch of podcast interviews today, or I've got there's some phone calls there. There's some personal time and things like that. And it also boils down to another thing that I've done is, this took time for me to figure this out, but I had to figure out where my energy levels are throughout the day. Yes, that required me to log, how am I feeling? How's my skills? How's my alertness? All of these things, factoring in also what I ate the day before or that morning or something like that, because there's certain foods that are really good for me, and there's many foods that are not, and not just from a health standpoint, but just from an awareness, inflammation, you name it, all those kind of things. So, getting understanding of that and knowing what my schedule is, I can look and go, all right, I know I have a really intense day on this day. Okay, make sure that you're eating foods the day before that will not bother you. Okay, and you're likely, so you're that way you show up, you are fully on point energy, not Tony Robbins level energy, but you're good. So by doing that, it allowed me to figure out when during the day am I good for certain types of tasks, when am I not, and then have control on when I book things. So that way, if I'm doing analytical work, mornings, definitely. I'm on it. We're good. I can fly through it. You ask me to do something like that at like 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, not good. Just because I know my skills and my gifts and when I'm on point and when I'm not. So by doing that, it helped me better match up work and do batch work and things like that. Again, color coding, you can say, okay, let's batch some similar things together, have themes for my days. And a good friend of mine, Virginia, taught me this one years ago because she called me out on this, being the burnout guy. She called the burnout guy out on this. She said, okay, all right, you color code your calendar. Yeah. All right, let me look. It's like, oh, sure. What color do you for your personal or me time or self-care time? And I say, well, you told me years ago, use your favorite color. So my favorite color is blue. So it's blue. So I can, again, squint at my calendar and I can see blue. And she goes, where the hell's all the blue next week? And I left. Ooh, convicted. So, yes. So I went, all right, let's see if there's some things that I can shift around. Let's add a little bit more me time to it. And again, that ebbs and flows. Everybody, I know a lot of people like, I want my Mondays and Fridays to look, dude, life. Things are going to happen. There's going to be construction on the floor above you during a podcast interview, or power goes out, or you name it. There's all kinds of things that happen. It's called life. It just happens. So you roll with the punches. But if you have that time management as best as you can, what it does is, from my perspective and people that I've helped, is it reduces the friction dramatically when something comes up out of the blue. And which it does. I had an opportunity this morning, a phone call that I've been wanting to have, and popped up, and they said, hey, any chance we could chat this morning? I said, 11:15 a.m. Here's the link. And they're like, wow. I'm like, how did you make that happen? Well, I've got some elbow room in my days, and
you're organized.
And I'm organized, and I can slot it in. So I'll be a great executive assistant if anybody wants to hire me for that kind of stuff. Don't ask me to be a barista to make your coffee because I drink it black, so it's not going to be a good mix. But I'll try. But yeah, no, that's great. Listen, yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Absolutely spot on. We're singing from the same song sheet there. And again, those who fail to plan to fail. So doing that time audit, if you really measure backwards and you take a look at, how have you shown up in the last few weeks? And I know we're entering a new year here, and don't penalize yourself, but really get honest with yourself and ask yourself, who do I need to be and how do I need to show up to do things differently moving forward? And that takes us to the fifth and final one of the five, which is a lack of execution, right? A lack of execution. We can get rid of your limiting beliefs, create the plan, create systems, optimize your time management and your calendar. But Michael, if you're not out there, taking what I call intelligent and inspired action, you're fooling yourself. And when I say intelligent and inspired action, I mean intelligent, which means smart, and inspired, which means not because you have to, but because you get to, right? And so when we really think about it, once you start executing, you also have to measure your progress. I mean, are you on track or off track? And you also have to really remain accountable. Now, what I've learned over the years is most people can't keep themselves accountable, and that's where you need a coach or a mentor or an accountability buddy or somebody. And that's why even today, I have not just one coach, but two coaches in my life that help me to run my coaching business, my mentoring business, my speaking business, my publishing business, all of the different real estate that we have, and some of our angel investing. So at the end of the day, I want the listener, I want you, I want anybody with a pulse to go back and honestly take a look at those five things, because what if those things that are holding you back and you start addressing them and just make either 5, 10, or 15% improvements in each of those categories? That's where the compound effect kicks in and sparks fly and magic happens. And for those of you that are keeners and you want to do 20 or 50 or 100%, I don't think you have to strive for that. I think you got to shoot for the 5, 10, 15, 20, maybe 25% improvement, but pick one or two categories first. Don't go after all five of them. Pick one or two. Do you need some mindset support? Do you need to create the plan? Do you need to create more systems? Do you need to optimize your calendar? Or do you need somebody to give you a good kick in the butt and make sure that you're executing? Because at the end of the day, remember that quote from Tony, success leaves clues. Success leaves clues. And I'll give you an example of one of my clients. His name is Joe. He lives in Cincinnati. And when he came to me, he was a real estate investor who had 4 single-family homes. 4 single-family homes, which is pretty good. But he wanted to scale, and every time somebody moved out of those houses, he'd have to repaint it or fix the floor or do something. And he said, Trevor, there's just not enough cash flow here. And I said, well, what if you were to invest in something bigger? Have you ever thought of investing in apartment buildings? And he said, apartment buildings, that's a big thing to take on. But we conditioned his mindset. We created the plan. We put in systems. We optimized what he was doing to learn about apartments and go out there and make offers. And then we had him execute it. Well, fast forward to today, Joe has now $2.7 billion in assets under management. $2.7 billion worth of apartments. And that's really from using those 5 things. Now, you don't have to, want to have billions of dollars in assets. But again, for anyone that isn't just interested, anybody that it's not just committed, anybody that's defiantly committed can use these 5 things to springboard forward. What do you think, Michael?
I think it's one of the most important lists that we've had on the show in quite some time. And I think if people truly, attack it, and I agree with you, start, a couple things at a time. Don't try to fix everything, because in the IT world, that means it'll break and then you're not sure what broke. And believe me, too many conversations with vendors on that one. He did it. All right, guess what we're going to do? I'll grab both of them. We're coming in here and no one's leaving until we get this fixed. I'll order pizza. I'll get some beers. Okay, we're going to get this fixed. And usually we did. But it was like we had to get past the, it's like, no, that doesn't do anything. And knock that off. Accountability. I'm holding you guys accountable. You hold us accountable. But it's such an important thing for businesses to look at this And much like everything, don't just look at it once. You do a check-in frequently on this to see, because my business today looks different than it did when I launched it. And 5 years from now, it's going to look different than it does now, because I'm constantly looking at it, working with my mentors and coaches and understanding, what is in demand, what's needed. How can I address that? Can I address it? If I can't, do I know somebody that can? All right, that and it's all about helping each other out. So important. Trevor, love this conversation. Where can people find out more about you and all this amazing work you're doing?
Well, thank you, first of all, for having me on the show. You do some great work, and I'm really impressed with, how long you've been doing this and the quality of the guests that you have on the show. So for anyone that's listening, stay in this community. For people that want to get a hold of me, you can find me at my website, which is trevormcgregor.com, trevormcgregor.com. But for the listener that is defiantly committed to really taking their life to the next level, I've got a gift for your listeners, Michael, where if you really want some of the best of the best of the best coaching frameworks that I have to offer, I've got this little mini audio series called Rich Beyond Belief. And my Rich Beyond Belief audio series is 8 mini recordings of the best frameworks that I use with my paying clients. And I'm going to give it to you and your listeners for free. And all you need to do is go to trevormcgregor.com/breakfast leadership. So again, anyone that's defiantly committed to moving themselves forward, pick up that program. There'll be a lot of great things that you can apply immediately in your business and your life so that you can have more success, more wealth, and more freedom.
Well, thank you for that generous gift. And I highly encourage everybody to take advantage of that, because again, you improve your business even a couple percent. What does that do? It's that ripple effect, and it just goes and goes and goes, and then you get addicted to growing it. You're like excited. It rekindles that relationship you have with your business. It's so critically important. Yes. So, Trevor, thank you again for being on the show. Really appreciate you and love all the work you're doing.
Well, thank you again, and keep up the great work.
Thanks for listening to the Breakfast Leadership Show. If you're dealing with a toxic workplace or feeling stuck in a challenging job, you don't have to go through it alone. Join our Dealing with Toxic Workplace community today at community.breakfastleadership.com and learn practical ways to protect your peace, rebuild confidence, and lead with strength. See you inside the community.